show maybe The Brave and the Bold, then you've probably either on purpose or accidentally heard of Bob Haney. And that is who we're going to be talking about tonight. See, when it comes to the greats that are out there, Bob Haney is definitely among those. And unfortunately, he doesn't get the notice or the kudos that people like Kirby or Stanley or Steve Ditko does, but he did do his big share of characters that I'm pretty sure that you've heard of, because some of them may have been in, if you're a DC fan, in one of your favorite DC films, for instance, or maybe one of your not so favorite DC films, but he did a much better version of it than the one that came out in the Suicide Squad, because he did create a character that actually shows up in the Suicide Squad. Now, Bob Haney was a revolutionary comic creator, and he started at the age of 22. His very first comic, well, you don't need to see me for this. Let's hit the slideshow and talk a bit about Bob Haney and see some of his best works and see exactly why I love him and his work so much. Here's Bob Haney right here. Bob Haney did some amazing work on some incredible comics. His very first comic story he did when he was only 22 years old for a comic called Black Cat Comics. And that would be this issue right here, issue number 9. It would be the very first work that he did. Now, Bob Haney would go on to work from a ton of different comic companies, from Fawcett to Harvey to a bunch of others. He did a lot of like crime stories and war stories, but he kind of like drifted around to a lot of different companies. It wouldn't be until he associated himself with DC that we truly get a turning point in Haney's career, where characters that would be made, would be created, or that he'd have a hand in. Now, one of the characters that Haney had, well, groups, I guess, that Haney had claimed to have some creation in was the Doom Patrol. Now, the Doom Patrol was created by Arnold Drake. Arnold Drake is the same guy that created Deadman and pretty much had his name taken off it because Neil Adams did most of Deadman. Arnold Drake did admit, however, that the Negative Man character was mostly created by Bob Haney. But his the first character, I guess, that he didn't create, but he would have kind of a bit of a hand in, is this one right here. So if you've ever seen Sergeant Rock, or read any of the Sergeant Rock comics that have come out over the years, well, those were by Joe Kubert and Robert Kanigher. But you see, the original Sergeant Rock, he wasn't called Sergeant. It was just Rock of Easy Co. And that was a comic story that was written by Bob Haney back in 1959. It would be Joe Kubert and Robert Koenig that would go ahead and pretty much make this character into their own and create the rank of sergeant for one, and take him from there and do some amazing things with the character. But it wouldn't be the only time that Haney and Koenig and Kubert would cross over, because Kubert would work on All-Star Comics, and later, once All-Star Comics got changed over to this one right here, The Unknown Soldier, he wrote a lot of Unknown Soldier stuff. Another Joe Kubert, Robert Kanigher creation that he worked on and did some amazing stuff with. See, the thing is that he wrote a lot of war comics early on, and it came back later on, and it kind of plentiful for him to actually work on these as well. He did an amazing job, and I remember reading these. I remember like GI Combat, The Unknown Soldier, all these war comics were part of my childhood. But the first character that he created, the one that I guess is going to be a bit more infamous, and the one that most like comic readers will know, and if you watch Stargirl, you probably know this character. You can see his face right down there in the corner of the book, and that's Eclipso. So Haney created Eclipso with artist Lee Elias back in House of Secrets number 61. This character would be a big heavy hitter as a villain. Would go on to fight a whole ton of like characters like Superman, Shazam. Would even have a big cornerstone crossover in 1992 called Darkness Within. If you never checked it, it was a pretty good crossover. I remember seeing a Eclipso comic where they actually had kind of a plastic diamond attached to it. Eclipso is a very different, unique kind of villain, anti-hero. It depends on how the character was written at the time, but Eclipso is one of those characters that you would not forget. Now, with just this character, he would have had a pretty good with this character and the characters that he'd worked on before, like Sergeant Rock and Unknown Soldier, that he'd done. There would have been a pretty good legacy to leave in the comic history. But his next creation would probably be the biggest one, or definitely one of the biggest that he did, and that's one that he did with Nick Cardy and Bruno Premiani, and that's the Teen Titans. The Teen Titans were originally created back in the Brave the Bold comics, and we got to see characters team up initially, like characters like Robin and we got like Speedy and Kid Flash, and you can see Wonder Girl there. These were created by him back in the Brave and the Bold comics. Of course, they would go on to be revamped and revitalized by Marv Wolfman and George Perez in the new Teen Titans. But that never could have happened if Bob Haney had not created the Teen Titans in the first place. And I'll tell you right now, the Brave and the Bold Titan issues are a lot of fun. They have a lot of they're of their time. So there's ones where they're basically lying down trying to stop a bulldozer from going over them, and Batman's like, run over those kids. I'm not joking. That's something that happens in one of the Brave the Bold comic books. Haney was head writer for the Brave and the Bold for a long period of time. Actually, he wrote pretty consistently on the comic until issue 157. Diving into one of the most infamous characters he created, and one of the greatest too, is Metamorpho. You've probably seen him in the Justice League cartoons. You've probably seen him in comic books. He is definitely a unique character. Metamorpho was a character that he created with Ramona Fradon, and made his first appearance back in Brave and the Bold issue 57. We'd see Metamorpho come up again and again. And when you see characters like Metamorpho, when Haney talks about having a part of a hand in the creation of Doom Patrol, it doesn't seem so off that he would worked on that, because Metamorpho definitely had that Doom Patrol feel to it. Now, he would work on many other characters throughout the years, including the Enchantress. Remember when I said there's one from a movie that you may not like? Well, that's Suicide Squad. And the Enchantress was a character that he created, along with other characters including Thomas Wayne Jr., who would become a big part of the Court of Owls storyline years upon years later. And just one I like to see people kind of do more with. He also did Volko, who was, of course, as you can tell, was played by Willem Dafoe in the Aquaman film, and created the character Tula. And yep, that's Young Justice right there, otherwise known as Aquagirl. He had a hand in the legacy of Aquaman as well, and that can never be forgotten. The stuff that he did. But ones that I don't like to forget are, like I mentioned earlier, the Super Sons, Superman Jr. and Batman Jr. They were incredible characters. He also created another character that I love that I didn't put up here, and I do apologize because I forgot it. But he created Kane. So if you're a House of Mystery fan, or you're a Sandman fan, you've read the Neil Gaiman Sandman comic book, the character of Kane initially started in House of Mystery. He was the host of the House of Mystery. Abel was the host of the House of Secrets, and Kane was the host of the House of Mystery. Haney created the character of Kane. It was meant to look a bit like Len Wein, the comic book writer. And it was a unique, cool character, and I was a huge fan of the House of Mystery growing up. And as I got older and went into college, I became a big fan of the Sandman as well. But he wouldn't stop there. He would go on, much like Alex Toth did, and I spoke about Alex Toth on here before, would go on to cross over into the world of animation, writing several episodes of the original Thundercats series. I think around 7 or 8 episodes, including Lord of the Shadows, which was the very first appearance, by the way, of the character Vulture Man, He did Return to Thundera, which was a time travel episode where they actually get to go back to the planet, among many others. And he had a great writing style that really suited these cartoons. Other cartoons that he worked for were things like Silverhawks. I know that he worked on that one as well. And he did some work on the New Adventures of Superman, as well as doing the Superman Aquaman hours, which makes kind of sense considering he created a couple of Aquaman seminal characters, and he was a big writer for DC. Now, Haney worked from the late 1940s into the 1980s, moving away from the comic industry until the 90s, the late 90s, where he would write some new scripts for DC. The last one of those was published posthumously, unfortunately, in 2008. Teen Titans, the last annual. Haney passed away at the age of 78 in 2004. I grew up reading many of his stories. I remember hunting down old issues of Brave and the Bold as a child, and actually far into my teens and adulthood. It was one of my favorite comics, and still is, to read alongside G.I. Combat and Adventure Comics. For me, Haney's creations and his stories weaved a special web of comfort. Haney was a renegade. He wrote characters to fit his stories, and anything happening in the current comics, that meant little to him. Didn't mean anything to him. He would make the story work. And I can honestly say, reading these back today, he did. He did make the story work. See, that's one of the most brilliant things about reading Brave and the Bold. You could pick up any issue at all, not have to know anything but the character. It was a Batman one, and every issue had a different guest character. And you did not have to know. You didn't have to read Sergeant Rock before. You didn't have to read Metamorpho. You didn't have to read Teen Titans, because he would get you into the story, because he would forget, if nowadays comic books are consistently reinventing themselves to make them reader-friendly, make them new reader-friendly. So new readers can jump in and become enamored with comics and hopefully keep reading. Bob Haney had it down pat early on. See, when comic companies now are going off on retreats to go together and decide what the next 12 issues of Spider-Man or Batman or Spawn is going to be, Bob Haney just basically took the comic characters, forgot the backlog that they had, and wrote. He sat down and he wrote a good story. What they were doing in the other books did not matter. Canon did not matter to Bob Haney. His writing is something that should never, ever be forgotten. It was brave, it was bold, and it was extremely entertaining. Personally, the writing of Bob Haney is something that I'll never forget, and it gave me so much joy and so much warmth at a certain time in my life. And right now, as I get a wee bit older, I find that I do go back often to read and reread some of those stories, whether it's the Super Son stories. They're all in here, by the way. I love this. Or the Brave and the Bold omnibuses. There's 3 of those that you can check out. The first 2 specifically have a lot of great work by Bob Haney, and not just by that. See, Bob Haney worked on these characters, and he brought in a lot of really good artists for Brave and the Bold. He brought in a lot of good artists to work with him. Neil Adams did some seminal work on the Brave and the Bold with under Haney's writing. He actually changed the look of Green Arrow during that time period. Haney's award, that his only award that he won, that wasn't posthumous, was for an issue of Brave and the Bold, one that a Deadman issue that was worked on with him and the great Neil Adams. There was an omnibus put a while back, a Neil Adams omnibus, It was a bit controversial because there was changes in the artwork, changes in the coloring of it. If you do want to see some of the great work that was done by Bob Haney and people like Neil Adams, Ross Andrew, Jim Aparo, then what you need to do is pick up the first couple omnibuses from Brave and the Bold. Pick up one of them, or pick up a trade paperback with Brave and the Bold. Because I'll tell you right now, the Neil Adams omnibus was recolored. The Brave and the Bold omnibuses and I don't think the trade paperbacks were untouched. So you can go in and read and enjoy some incredibly classic, amazing work by Mr. Haney. Because that's what I'm going to do tonight. As soon as I get off here, I'm diving into the next story, Cry Not for My Forsaken Son. And I'm looking forward to it. So thank you, Bob Haney. You'll never be forgotten by me, and hopefully after this video there'll be a lot of you that won't forget his work as well. A brave, a bold, and incredible author.